Welcome, everybody. This is Jimmy, and you're reading with Jimmy. We're reading Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales together. This is The Merchant's Tale, translated by Theodore Morrison. Ready? Let's get started. There's a prologue. Prologue to The Merchant's Tale. Weeping and wailing, care and other sorrow, I know sufficiently by night and morrow, the merchant said. Don't forget the narrator is an anonymous narrator who's telling us what pilgrims like the merchant tell us. So there's a narrator. This is a story inside a story. And then when the merchant starts talking here with his tale, it's a story inside a story inside a story. It's complex, but it's well worth understanding that. And others also know if they are married men. To prove it so, I'm going to tell you that it happens thus with me. I have a wife, the worst one there could be. For though the fiend were yoked with her, I swear she'd overmatched him and have the strength to spare. Who's the fiend? That's the devil. So he's basically saying the wife he has would beat the devil. Why in detail should I expose to view her bitter malice? She's a perfect shrew. What's a shrew? A woman who is unpleasant, bad-tempered, and prone to nagging and scolding. So he's talking about his wife. You talk about your wife like that? Oh. There is a wide and mighty opposition between Griselda's wonderful submission, and you should look up Griselda. Remember, classic literature has many allusions. And the exceeding cruelty of my wife. Could I untie the knot for all my life, I never again would tumble in the snare. We married men, we live in grief and care. And by St. Thomas, whoever tries it out, pardon me, bless me, whoever tries it out, will I find the truth beyond a doubt. The greater part I cannot tell at all. What? God forbid that such a thing befall. Ah, good host, I've been a husband now 2 months, no more than that, and yet I vow that men without a helpmate all their lives, though people pierce them to the heart with knives, could not, no matter how they tried, relate to a quantity of sorrow half so great as I could tell of my wife's cursedness. Well then, Sir Merchant, said the host, God bless your soul, you know so much about that art. Speak up, and I beg you, let us hear a part. Gladly, the merchant answered, but of my own sore, for misery of heart, I'm going to say no more. I'm going to pause and clear my nose. Hold on one second. Jimmy's back. Pardon me. Sometimes, you can't help a sneeze, right? Okay, that was the prologue. This is the Merchant's Tale. In Lombardy once lived a prosperous knight who had satisfied his fleshly appetite on women 60 years without a wife, as do those fools of irreligious life. But turning 60, whether in devotion or merely in his dotage, he took the notion to be a married man and settled down. He labored at all hours, searching the town for prospects, praying that he might not miss, by the Lord's will, his taste of wedded bliss, hoping to live within that holy plan in which God first united woman and man. Isn't that beautiful language? No other life, he said. Remember the narration. This is about a night now. The merchant's telling a story about a night. And there's an anonymous narrator talking about the merchant telling us about the night. That's the story inside a story inside a story. No other life, the knight said, is worth a bean. Wedlock is happy, spotless, and serene. So much so that it is heaven on earth. So said this wise old knight, this man of worth. And certainly as true as God is king, to bring a wife home is a glorious thing, especially when a man is old and white. She's the very savor of delight. And then should he take a wife both young and fair, on whom he can beget himself an heir. I don't know if you already read the one of the tales where there's an old hag that makes a wish. I think it's the Summoner's Tale or one of those tales, but we'll refer to that in our analysis. Let's keep reading. Then all the days in joy and solace pass, while bachelors can only sing, alas, when they encounter some catastrophe in their armors, mere childish vanity. Building on quicksand, they will find for sure quicksand it is when taken for secure. A married life is ordered and content. Who is so faithful and obedient? A wife to mate, or else who can there be to tend to him sick and well so anxiously, loving and serving him with tireless breath, although he lies bedridden till his death? And yet some scholars hold this isn't so. One is such Theropatus. And who's Theropatus? Well, you got to look him up, right? Theropatus is, in fact, if you look up here, an ancient Greek philosopher and naturalist and was Aristotle's close colleague. So he lived around the time of Aristotle. So one is Theoropilus, but who through it pleases him to lie, don't wed, says Theophilus, with any notions of economy, of hope of cutting down household expense. A faithful servant shows more diligence in keeping your possessions than your wife, for she'll lay claim to half of them for life. And God help me if you have ill health to bear, real friends or servants give you better care than she whose policy it is to wait until she can inherit your estate. Not thinking much of a wife, is he? And if you take a wife to warm your bed, the chances that you'll be cuckolded. Right? Instead, this saying, and 100 that are worse, the man writes, on his bones God send a curse. But take no stock in all such vanity. Scout Theopolis, pay heed to me. So now he's going to say, a wife is God's gift, furniture and rent, money and jewels, lands and rights are lent. Only at fortune's pleasure, one and all, they pass no more than shadows on a wall. But a wife remains far longer in your house than you may want her, lasting the enduring spouse. A marriage is a solemn sacrament. Destruction on a man since imminent who has no helpmate. He is desolate. I speak of people in the secular state. And why? My words are not idle. We are taught that woman is a man's helpmate, was first wrought when God made Adam and the work was done. And seeing him belly naked and alone, God said, according to his gracious plan, let us now make a helpmate for this man, like to him, and so he fashioned Eve. Here, by established proof, you may perceive that a wife is man's support above all price, his comfort, and his earthly paradise. So pliant and so virtuous is she, that they cannot help but live in unity. One flesh they are, and one flesh, as I guess, has but one heart in joy or in distress. Ah, wife, ah, holy mother of God, how can affliction ever touch a married man? It's more than I or any tongue can do to tell the happiness between these two. If poor, she helps him work, she spares him waste. All that her husband likes is to her taste. And she never answers no when he says yes. Do this, says he. Already done, sir, she says. Any man worth a cabbage all his life ought to thank God on bare knees for his wife. It's different points of view, right? A man will never be hoodwinked nor fooled if by his wife's advice he is schooled. For women are so faithful and so wise that a prudent man will do as they advise. Taught by his mother's counsel, Jacob won his father's blessing. Though the youngest son, wrapping his neck in kid skin, Judith kept God's. Now he's giving you examples from the Bible. So, ladies and gentlemen, remember what Jimmy tells you. It's important to read your Bible, to read these other books, Greek mythology, in order to gain an appreciation for this literature, classical literature. Judith kept God's people safe, while Hohenfern slept. Through wise forethought, she slew him with a nail. Right? So it's a long wind up here. He's telling you about the relationships between them. Nabal, her spouse, was saved by Abigail from being slain. And think how Esther freed the people of God from misery at their need. And through good counsel saw that Mordecai, by Aphareus, was exalted high. There's no superlative degree in life, so says Seneca, above a humble wife. So now Seneca is not part of the Bible, but he's a Roman. So the narrator is jumping from biblical references, allusions, to Roman allusions. Here's Cato. That's another Roman. And these are arguments that the knight is making. He's telling this. The merchant is telling the story about the knight who's talking. And remember, he's 60 years old and he wants to get a wife. Allow your wife her tongue, as Cato urges. She shall command, and you must bear her scourges. And yet she will obey, for courtesy. She'll be your mistress of economy. A sick man, when he has no wife to keep his house in order, may well wail and weep. And be warned, this is the fruit of my research. And love your wife as Christ has loved his church. Loving yourself, you love your wife. No man will hate his flesh, but nurse it while he can. And so my bidding is cherish your wife, if ever you hope to prosper in this life. A wife and a husband take the safer way for worldly people, whatever wits may say, so firmly knit that no harm can betide, especially upon the woman's side. And so this night, this January, and there's his name, January, of whom I told, who's I? That's the merchant, considered both that he was growing old and that in marriage. So who was saying all this, right? If we go back and look at the narrator of this section here, it's really the merchant talking aloud. And then suddenly now here comes the knight. And that in marriage with true helpmate, in virtuous life tranquil and honey sweet, and for his friends he one day duly sent to let them know the drift of his intent. I want to get married, he told his buddies. With serious face he let his mind unfold. My friends, he said. Who's he? The knight. I am growing white and old. White. What does that mean? Well, he's got white hair. I'm almost, God knows, on the final brink, and somewhat of my soul I ought to think my body I have foolishly expended. And now, bless the Lord, my folly will be mended. I mean, in fact, to be a married man, and that with all the promptness that I can. I'll have a maid of tender years and fair, no more than 20. Make it your first care, I beg. I'll look about, but you can spy a proper match more readily than I, since there are more of you. But of one thing I warn you, my friends, I will not bring an old wife home, that's for certain. For old fish and young flesh, by the adage, are my dish. A pike is better than a pickerel, and better than old beef is tender veal. A woman kept for 30 years in storage is only a bean straw and exhausted forage. Look at what kind of guy talks like this. Oh. Old widows, too, of such craft are possessed that I could never live with them in rest. Scholars grow subtle, taught in various schools. Women of much instruction are no fools. They are half scholars, a young thing we can guide, as warm wax by the fingers can be plied. Wherefore I will not have, and for this cause, an old wife. And on this point we needn't pause. If it should happen she couldn't give me pleasure, well, then I'd be driven to a desperate measure. To lechery and adultery I would fly, and I would go straight to the devil when I die. If you give me an old woman, She should conceive no child, and it would be far worse than if my hounds had eaten me. If my estate, and I say this to you all, should lapse and in the hands of strangers fall, I am not in my dotage, be it said. I know the reasons why a man should wed. If he can't always keep to a chaste life religiously, he ought to take a wife. For procreation, honoring God above, not the indulgence only or for love, and those who wed to give the flesh its due, the sin of lechery by this means eschew, abstain from lechery if you get married, right? Or they may also wed to help each other in trouble as sisters should a brother, and live together in holy chastity. But, sirs, with pardon, that's not for me. For this, thank God, is a boast that I can make. My limbs are stout enough to undertake whatever it's proper that a man should do. I best can tell what I am equal to. Although my hair is white, it sits on me like bloom before the fruit upon a tree. A tree of blossom is neither dry nor dead, and I feel nowhere white but on my head. My heart and all my limbs are still as green, and a laurel all year round, whatever seen. And now, since you have heard my full intention, accede to it, I beg, without dissension. Don't disagree, just do what I want you to do. Help me find a wife. His friends at once were eager to unfold their various views and cases from of old. But as in every friendly disputation, the question always ends in altercation. So a strife sprang up between the knight's two brothers. Placebo was the name of one, and the other's name was Justinus. So January has two brothers, Placebo, Justinus. You've had little need, it's clear, to ask advice of any of us as here, Placebo said, but that you would not shun the wise word that we have from Solomon, who said, do everything by counsel, and the event will never bring you reason to repent. In other words, get some advice, don't just act crazy, right? Despite his word, God never give me rest if I don't think that your own design is best. I've been a courtman, though unworthily, and I stood about in noble company, and I never contradicted them. Why? I'm well aware my Lord knows more than I. Whatever he says, for settled truth, I take. I say the same or as near as I can make it. A counselor who thinks that his advice outweighs his Lord's is a fool at any price. Jimmy's got a note here. Who's talking? Well, this is Placebo, right? Lords are no fools, as you today have shown. By God, there isn't a man in the whole town, nor in Italy, who could have spoken better. Christ will approve your counsel to the letter. It shows a high heart, truly, and a bold in any man who is getting to be old, to marry a young thing by my father's kin. You're fastening your heart on a fine pin, a pretty one. Do just as you please, for my best judgment with your own agrees. In other words, Placebo's on your side, Mr. Knight, whose name is January, right? Brother, you've had your word, so now listen, I pray. Justinus answered, that's the other brother, to whom I have to say, Seneca tells us that we should understand to whom we give our chattels and our land, and I ought to know on every score to whom I give my chattels. How much more I ought to know to whom I give away my body and for good. It's no child's play to take a wife without investigation. It ought to be your earnest occupation to find out whether she is wise or lazy, sober or drunk, or shrewish or man-crazy, rich, poor, wasteful. And though it is a folly to look for anything unblemished wholly in this world, man or beast, a wife who had a few more virtuous qualities than bad ought to suffice. But that takes time to learn. For I, God knows, have felt the salt tears burn in secret since I married. Praise who will a husband's life, I find it has its fill of cost and care, and lean in its reward. And yet my neighbors, all with one accord, especially these womenfolk, contrive to say that I have the truest wife alive, and meekest. But I best know where the shoe pinches my foot. Do as you want, brother. Do for all of me. And yet I say, beware how you embark on marriage. If she's fair, and young especially, the youngest man among us will be doing all he can by keeping his wife his own. You won't trust me? Well, please her for 3 years. And for less than 3, that is to say, to her full satisfaction. A wife imposes many a strict extraction. And I hope all of this, that you're not offended, what I'm telling you. The action of demanding and obtaining something, especially a payment for services. So he's giving a counter argument to January, old January, right? Justinus, then placebo. Well, answered January, have you ended? Rubbish! Your Seneca and your Proverbs, pedantic stuff. They're not worth a sack of herbs. Wiser than you support me as you've heard in my intention. Placebo, what's your word? Well, I hold it is a cursed man, said Placebo, who puts up bars to wedlock, certainly. With that they rose, and quickly as they could, they agreed that he should marry when he would. Strange fantasies and deep preoccupation about his marriage seized the imagination of January. So they both agree he should marry when he can, right? And now his preoccupation, he's got his imagination, his mind, January's mind was thronged in the night. As one who had set a mirror polished bright, at midpoint in a crowded marketplace with many fair shapes and many a pretty face, so all the maidens of the neighborhood passed through his thoughts. One choice at first seemed good for beauty, and then one enjoyed a wide acclaim for truth and kindness. One had a bad name, though rich. But love is blind, it can't see. At last, upon his own authority, he made his choice, and as he lay in bed, he pictured himself in heart and head, how fresh her beauty was, her age how tender, her waist how small, her arms how long and slender, her prudent conduct and her gentleness, her womanly bearing and her faithfulness. Oh, and when his mind was fixed on her and fettered, he thought his choice could never have been bettered. Another summons to his friends he sent, and he asked them first to make no argument against his purpose. He said, there lived in the town a girl whose beauty was of great renown, and even though she had been humbly bred, her youth and beauty were enough, he said, and he would take this girl to be his wife in peace and holiness and live his life. One point, he said, January, one point still makes my conscience wince. No man has perfect joy. I've heard this long since, both here on earth and also up in heaven. Shun, though he will his sins, the deadly 7 and every branch of the accursed tree. Yet there is such complete felicity, happiness in marriage, and its comforts are so great that I find myself now in my aging state appalled, lest I should lead to a merry life, so delicate and free from every strife, that I shall have my paradise right here. And since true paradise is bought so dear, I'm going to stop before I turn the page, and these are the 7 sins, the deadly 7 sins: pride, greed, lust, wrath, envy, gluttony, sloth. You can pause me and read this, right? You can pause the reading. These are the 7 deadly sins. I did them for you because they appear constantly in these tales. And since true paradise is brought so dear, through stern repentance and through tribulation, how should I, when I live in such elation as married men all do, come to that bliss in which Christ lives eternal? Tell me this. So he's, what's the hang-up? If that is the sole obstacle you see, replied Justinus, remember that's his brother, then it well may be that God's mercy you'll repent before you've even led your wife to the church door. What God sees to it that his grace is sent, a married man to help his soul repent, far oftener than to a single man. So hence, I'm going to give you the best advice I can. Do not despair. In the upshot of the story, she may turn out to be your purgatory. You know what purgatory is, right? It's the halfway house between heaven and hell. She may become God's means of grace, his whip, and then your soul straight up to heaven will skip, faster than any arrow from a bow. I hope hereafter you will come to know that marriage, in its great felicity, happiness, you will use its pleasures moderately and keep from other species of temptation, will prove no fatal hindrance to your salvation. On marriage, this great project that you have planned, the wife of Bath, if you can understand, has much to say as well, and since it is in a small place, and now goodbye. God keep you in his grace. We're going to read the wife of Bath as one of the stories. Keep that in mind. He's referring to another pilgrim, right? Well, how does he know, Jimmy? This is inside the story, inside the story. This is the knight telling the story, and this is the brother's knight talking. And all of a sudden, now he's referring to the wife of Bath. You see how it gets mixed up sometimes? That's why it's important to follow narration. January's brothers, when they saw that it must be, with all the shrewdness of legality, contracted that this girl, whose name was May, so now you have January and May, should promptly wed this January. The day arrived at last when off to church they went, there to receive the Holy Sacrament. Wearing his stole, the priest instructed her to be as Sarah and Rebecca were, faithful and wise. And he said the usual prayers and signed them with the cross and asked that theirs might be a union such as God would bless, and made all safe enough with holiness. And thus they have been married solemnly. Okay, they tied a knot. This is the merchant now. See, there's no quotes or nothing, so this is all merchant talking. Gay is the palace. From all Italy the daintiest food and music have been brought. Nor Orpheus nor Amaphon could have wrought such melodies. So loud they were to hear that Joab never trumpeted so clear. Nor Thermodus with the fate of Thebes in doubt. Bacchus in every nook and pouring out the wine, and Venus smiled both left and right, for January had become her knight, and meant to show that no one could disparage his prowess, whether in liberty or in marriage. The wedding torch in hand, she danced along before the bride, and the whole blissful throng. You, Martinus, poet, who celebrated the nuptials when philology was mated with Mercury, with the songs that were, these are all allusions to Greek mythology and so on. He's the twin son of Zeus. You can pause me and read this for yourself. Joab was the king nephew of David. That's biblical. Theodamus seems to have been an Indo-Greek ruler, etc. So these are all sprinkled in here by the merchant to show examples of really the happiness of this couple that just got married. With Mercury, with songs that were sung by 9 muses. Too feeble is your tongue to write this merry wedding on your page, when tender youth was matched with stooping age. The bride sat so becomingly and well that to behold her seemed a kind of spell. Queen Esther viewed with no such downcast cheek, or Isis, nor with eye to meek. And January, whenever he saw her face like one entranced, stood ravished in his place. But in his heart he threatened that come night he would strain her to him with more appetite than Paris did his Helen. It's an allusion to Paris, who stole Helen and started the Trojan War. Nonetheless, knowing that he must offend her tenderness, he pitied her. "Oh, would God," he said, "oh, fair and tender flesh, that you might fully bear my sharp and keen desire. But that I did all I desired to do, may God forbid." It's getting horny. Would it were night, and night were never done, and would it to God these people were all gone, says January. He took whatever measures he could take in a sly fashion for politeness' sake, to hurry them from the table. And at last they rose and danced and drank, and then they cast spices around the house, and every man was merry but one, a squire named Damien, who craved for January many a day. Got a squire here who really serves the night, Damien. He craved for January many a day. He didn't crave. Slap myself. He carved for January, but he was so ravished that he craved for the Lady May that he was beside himself, for her brand Venus so hurt him that he could scarcely stand. He sought his bed as fast as he knew how. I have no more to say about him for now. I leave him there to weep and to complain till the young May takes pity on his pain. This is called foreshadowing. You understand? Foreshadowing. Foreshadowing, what's that? That's seeing ahead of time. Hold on. Sorry. Pardon me. Foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is when you're telling the reader something that's going to happen ahead of time. I, the merchant, will leave him there to weep and to complain till the young May takes pity on his pain. So this is going to happen. The squire loves May. Okay? This is very interesting narration. So you've got a guy telling a story, right? These are the pilgrims. I'm going to leave him there for now in my story, and I'll come back to him. You see how that works? Isn't that beautiful? It's like a scene change when you're watching a movie. The scene changes. You leave the characters in one position, and you switch to a different scene, and then you come back later. Pardon me, I'm sniffling a little bit. O perilous fames, that in the bedstraw glow, carved into service by a household foe, false stewards, servants sly and treacherous from your acquaintance, God deliver us, as from the subtle adder in the breast. O January, this is the merchant singing, right? O January, drunken and possessed by your desire, behold how Damien, your own squire, and your humble serving man intends to work on you an injury. God help you spy this household enemy. For in this world no peril can befall worse than a foeman in your very hall. Note my little red arrows. That's important. That's betrayal, right? The squire is going to betray his master. The sun's diurnal arc has run its turn, and no longer may his body now sojourn upon the horizon in that latitude. Night, with its mantle that is dark and rude, spreads through the hemisphere and all about. And now lusty company sets out, and taking leave with thanks on every side, home to their houses cheerfully they ride. And then the time came when hasty January desired to go to bed. He would not tarry. He drank spiced wines and cordials, and partook of sundry aphrodisiacs from the book De Cuto, composed by Constantine, the accursed monk. Of many that were fine, that he had plentiful supply on call. Aphrodisiacs, right? Little things that make you more in the love-making mood, right? He had plentiful supply on call and no distaste for eating one and all. Quote, for God of love, as soon as it can be, he told his friends, without discourtesy, empty the house. And at length the bride was led, no stone more silent, to the marriage bed. And by the priest the bed was duly blessed, and all the people from the chamber pressed. I don't know if you've ever seen scenes in medieval movies, but they gather around the bed after the wedding night, especially for royalty. And January needed no advice to seize his youthful May, his paradise, and he fondles her, he kisses her right often. But little had a fresh trim done to soften his bristling beard, as harsh as doggish skin, and sharp as briar. Quote, alas, that I must sin against your tenderness before I'm through, he said. And yet think, he said, no laborer can do his task at once both well and hastily. Fast, cheap, right? He can't do it well and hastily. With leisure, this will go perfectly. And how long we frolic, well, that's your own affair. In wedlock we are joined as a true pair, and blessed be the yoke that we are in. For acts of marriage do not count as sin. A man can do no sin with his own wife, nor trespass on himself with his own knife. The law itself has given us leave to play. Merchant takes over in narration. And so he labored till the break of day. Endurance. And took a sop in wine and sat up straight and sang aloud in bed and kissed his mate and squawked and jabbered like a magpie. While he sang, the skin hung slack and dry about his neck. So he's an old guy, right? But God knows in her heart what mate thought as he played his coatlish part. In other words, I'm a stud. In shirt and nightcap, his neck wrinkled lean. Look at the picture that the merchant is painting of the old knight. Is it respectful? She did not think his antics worth a bean. Let me mark that. She did not think his antics, whatever they were, worth a bean. That day has come, he said at last. I'll take my rest now, for I cannot stay awake. And down he laid his head and slept till prime. And later, at what he thought a fitting time, January arose. But youthful May remained within her room till the fourth day. A custom that brides observed, and for the best, for every laborer sometimes must have rest, or else he could not hope to stay alive. Bird, beast, man, no creature would survive. This Damien, meanwhile, now we're back to the squire, sick with Venus's fire, so burned that he was dying for desire, and secretly he set about to burrow a pen case, and set down his tale of sorrow, as a complaint in form, or as a lay to the fresh beauty of his Lady May. And putting his life at risk, for better or worse, he pinned it next to his heart in a silk purse. So he writes down how affectionate he is for May, puts it near his heart. So when young May had left the fourth day pass, and from noon to noon, then after the high mass, at dinner in the hall she took her place. Fresh as a summer's morning was her face. And it chanced that January, that kindly man, bethought himself of absent Damien. Mother of God, January said, how can it be that Damien isn't here to carve for me? To wait on him and carve the meat, right? What, is he ill? But the other squires were quick to excuse him on the ground that he was sick. Nothing else, they said, could keep him from his charge. Well, this troubles me no little by and large, said January. I never expect to meet a squire so wise, trustworthy, and discreet. A pity it would be if he should die. He's an excellent man. But by the by, when we have finished dinner, I shall pay a visit to him, and so shall May, to give him comfort. From this generous word the knight was blessed by everyone who heard. Madame, he said, be sure that you and all your young women after dinner go and call on Damien. Say that I will come as well as soon as I have rested for a spell. But hurry, he told her. I can hardly bide the time till you are sleeping by my side. With her attendant women, the young maid went presently to the room where Damien lay, and she sat down by his bedside full of cheer, and Damien, when he saw that the way was clear, slipped the purse into her hand. And he sighed, and he said, Mercy, do not expose me. I am dead, if what is in this purse should come to light. So she hid the purse as quickly as she might, within her bosom, and there it left safely say, and while back to January she makes her way. He, on the bedside comfortably, was seated. Pardon me. With many a kiss his youthful bride he greeted, and then all at once he lay down to sleep. She feigned the need to go where we are all constrained to go at sundry times, to the bathroom. By this invention she gave to Damien's billet due attention, and tearing it to pieces at the last, the shreds in the privy secretly she cast. So she reads the note and throws it into the privy, the toilet. In those days they did not have running water. It was a hole, right? Who now is in the study but fair May? You see how this narrator, the merchant, is talking? Who now in the study is but fair May? Beside old January down she lay, who slept until he woke up with a cough and wanted her to take her clothing off, for he desired of her. He said some pleasure to which her clothes would not be a helpful measure. Whether or not she liked it, she obeyed. But least the more fastidious should upbraid. Just what he did I do not dare tell, or whether she thought it paradise or hell. This merchant is a pretty good narrator. I'm not going to tell you what they did. I leave them at their work. I leave them there while the day flies till the bell for evening song when they must rise. Whether it was predestined or by chance, or that the planets did not look askance, but stood at that time in benign array, since all things have their time, the learned say. For any woman to obtain her love, I can't answer, the great God above, who knows that nothing is without cause. Let him judge of this matter. But truth was that in her youth and freshness the fair maid took an impression from that very day, and so full of pity for this Damien, that from her heart she cannot drive the man. I don't care whom this thing may offend, she thought, for here I promise to the end to love him best of any soul alive. How nobly generosity can thrive in women when their minds are left alone. Some tyrant with a heart as hard of stone might well let him perish in his place rather than take him kindly to her grace, and rejoicing in the cruelty of her pride, heedless that she became a homicide. What does that mean? What does that mean? Think about it. Not so this gentle May, for on her part, since pity soonest filled the noble heart, she wrote to him, who's him? Damien, and granted him her grace. Nothing remained, she said, but time and place. Well, there you have it. And when the road was clear, this gentle maid called upon Damien again one day, and under his pillow slyly thrust her letter, and squeezed his hand and told him, please get better. Upon his feet was Damien by the morrow, quite vanished were his sickness and his sorrow. That didn't take long, did it? He preened and prined himself and combed his hair and went to January with an air as humble as a dog beneath the stick. He was so pleasant, so politic, that all who spoke to him spoke only good, and fully in his lady's grace he stood. You know, some scholars tell us that the only true felicity is pleasure. To this view, in noble fashion, as he became a knight, January subscribed with all his might. Happiness is in pleasure, and January believed that. And his house, his way of life, were like a king's, and he had a garden, and among other things, walled in with stone. And truly, I suppose that he who wrote the Romance of the Rose, there's a footnote here, it's a 13th century allegorical dream vision poem written in Old French. Remember, the writer, who's the narrator of the teller of the tale and the knight in here, these are allusions that he who wrote the Romance of the Stone could tell its beauty only in part, nor could Priapus summon up the art. In Greek mythology, Priapus was a minor fertility god. So he's talking about the garden that was walled, right? Though god of gardens, to describe how cool amid the garden lay the flowering pool under a laurel that was always green. Many a time came Pluto and his queen Prosperina with all their fairy throng about this pool, dancing and making song. In Roman mythology, Pluto was the god of the underworld, and his queen Prosperina, Prosperone in Greek mythology. Old January here so loved to be in that garden that no one was allowed to touch the key to the garden except himself. He carried, early and late, a silver latchkey to the wicket gate, and in the summer thither he would go with his wife May, and no one else would know. And anything that wasn't done in bed, he accomplished in that garden plot instead. He's really horny, huh? So this old January and youthful May lived in this fashion many a merry day. But worldly satisfactions will take wing for January and every living thing. O stroke of chance, O fortune mutable, like the deceiving scorpion, inscrutable, with flattery in his eye, death in his tail. O brittle joy, your venom will not fail. Strange monster that in hues of steadfast glow can paint your gifts, deceiving high and low. Old January, whom you first received, fortune, you, as your full friend, why have you now bereaved of both his eyes? This noble man, alas, amid prosperity, seen his pleasure pass, for he is now blind, and that quite suddenly. So January goes blind. Boom. And with the loss of fire of jealousy, so burns his heart that in his grief and pain he wishes both his wife and he were slain. He wanted her and himself in death and life, neither his mistress nor again his wife, but dressed in black and in her widowed state, sole as the turtle dove without a mate. But when he had fretted for a month and raged, his grief at last began to surge. He bore in patience his adversity. Okay, I'm blind. Except for his outrageous jealousy, which would not suffer his wife for love or honor to take a step without his hand upon her. Huh, it's pretty possessive, huh? He's blind and he's not letting his wife go anywhere without him touching her. Huh. I helped a blind guy once go to the restroom, and he said, let me put my hand on your shoulder. That's the best way to help a blind man. That's a true story. And this brought many a tear to the young May, and grief to Damien. Neither night nor day could he speak words of purpose to her ear, unless old January was there to hear. But back and forth between them letters went, and each by signs knew what the other meant. So they're exchanging letters. They're giving visual signs, even though January never lets go of May. Oh, January, what would it avail if you could just see how far ships can sail? For in the end, there is no worse to be deluded blind man when a man can see. Argus, although he had 100 eyes, was yet deceived, and so, to their surprise, have others who have never could suppose that they would find themselves hoodwinked, God knows. Argus is a reference to Greek mythology. Again, you can look that up. In warm wax made a double of the key that January kept. So, look at this. Find hoodwinks that have others been who never could suppose that they would find themselves hoodwinked. The youthful May, despite his jealousy, in warm wax made a double of the key that January kept by which he went into the garden. And knowing her intent, Damien took the wax and made it from as slyly as he could counterfeit. And this key portends a marvel, it is clear, which, if you want to listen, you're going to hear. Ovid, God knows the truth, he's a Roman poet, of what you say so nobly. Where is the ruse, the trickery that in some way love will not find, though long and arduous? Remember Thisbe and her Primus? There's another illusion. Now, Jimmy's not writing these illusions all the time. Why? Because he wants you to look them up. He wants you to pause, go on to Google and look up these, if you haven't read them. But you should be reading Greek mythology, which we read on this website from time to time. Though strictly kept apart, yet after all they made their plans by whispering through a wall. A stratagem that no one could have guessed. It happened that January became obsessed. Through his wife's egging on, again to pay a visit to the garden. So, come on, January, come on. The 8th day of June had come up when, up, he said, my love, come forth now, for your eyes are like a dove. Winter is past, and all his wet rains are dried. The voice of the turtle is heard on the land. My bride, my shining spouse, come forth now and be mine. The garden's enclosed, fairer than wine. Your breasts are to behold, my chosen wife, in whom I have found no blemish all my life. Such were the old lascivious words, he said. She signaled to Damien, go on instead, go ahead, get ahead of us. And with the key, he slipped through the gate, and quietly under a bush, he sat down to wait. And then as January, as blind as any stone, with May in hand, thinking that they were alone, entered the garden, fresh and fair. And behind them he banged the wicket so that none should find them. You are the soul, January said, that I best love. For by the Lord who sits in heaven above. Now imagine the scene, right? Damien's sitting there waiting in the bushes. She's leading January in there, and he's confessing his love for her. I should far no further die upon a knife than do you any wrong, my true wife. Remember how I chose you, not for greed, God is my witness, but pure love indeed. And though I may be old and cannot see, and yet for the love of God, be true to me. 3 things you have to gain by being true. The love of Christ, the honor that is due a faithful wife, and my estate entire. Have the agreement drawn up as you desire. It's all yours, and I will have this done before the setting of tomorrow's sun. So may God bring my soul at last to bliss. And now, in covenant, let me ask a kiss. And do not blame the jealous watch that I keep for you are printed on my heart so deep, that knowing I am old and you are fair, makes absence from you even more than I could bear. For very love, and this is past all doubt, kiss me, wife, and then we'll stroll about. At this, the youthful maid began to weep. I have a soul as well as you can keep, she answered. Let me perish on that day. So help me God, and in the foulest way a woman can, when I do such a shame to all my kind, or sully to my name, as to be false. And should I prove so black, Then have me stripped and put me in a sack, and then in the nearest river let me drown. I am gently bred, no woman of the town. Why do you speak to me like this? But ever untrue, you men are, your reproofs are ever new. You don't know how to wear a trustful face, but doubt and accuse me of disgrace. And with this she looked, and she saw where Damien was sitting under the bush, and she began to cough. With her fingers stealthily she motioned him to climb up in a tree that stood charged with fruit, and up he went. He knew well what her every signal meant, and was acquainted with her mind far better than her own husband was. For in a letter she had told him how the business should proceed, and given him all the instructions that he would need. And so I leave him. See how the narrator talks? I leave him perched in the pear tree, while January and May stroll merrily. Bright was the day, and blue was the firmament, and Phoebus the sun flowed down golden in descent to gladden every flower with balminess. He, who's he, was in Gemini, the sun. As I should guess, only a little, they were very, very astute in the stars and the constellations. Only a little from his declination in Cancer, which is Jupiter's exaltation. We're going to examine that closely one day, but about how they looked at the sky, the night skies. Remember, there's no television. That's it. It's the night sky. And so it happened that bright morning-tide, that in the garden at the farther side, Pluto, who is the king of fairy, Pluto, the god of the underworld, and many a lady in his company, was sitting on a turf bench, fresh and green, together with Proserpina, his queen. So Pluto and queen are sitting there, whom he had ravished once upon a day, and in his grisly chariot fetched away while she was gathering flowers in a mead on Etna, as in Claudian you may read. Wife, said Pluto. Now, the scene changes now. We're looking at Pluto and his wife, right? Prosperina. Okay, let's mark that so you remember that. Prosperina. So now we're listening to a conversation between Pluto and Prosperina. Wife, Pluto said, this no one can deny, that experience daily thrusts on every eye the myriad treasons that women do to man. There are 10,000 noble tales that I can tell you and relate to your sly fickleness and stealth. O Solomon, first in wisdom and in wealth, remembrance of your words ought not to fail. Thus did he praise the virtuous of the male. Among 1,000 men I have found one, but among women I have found none. And so says the king who knows your wickedness. Jesus, the son of Sacra, as I guess, speaks of you too with little deference. An itch and a corrupting pestilence this very day upon your body's light. Do not see this honorable knight? Because, alas, he's blind, he's old of limb, his own man is about to cuckold him. See where he sits, the lecher is in the tree. But now I propose, in my majesty, in justice to this old blind worthy knight, to give him back again his lost sight. Just when his wife intends to wrong his name, he will know that she's a harlot, and to the shame of her and all who may be like her too. So, said Prosperina, his wife, that's what you'll do? Then by my mother's soul, I'm going to undertake to give her and all the women for her sake an answer so adequate to save their faces. And if they are taken in embarrassing cases, I will see to it that no woman dies for lack of an answer. Though with both of her eyes that a man has seen the thing, and yet we shall swear outface and weep and scold and overbear, and by our boldness find some means to excuse us, and to put a rout the people who accuse us, until you men look gullible as geese. What do I care about your authorities? I know well that this Jew, this Solomon, found women who were fools, and more than one. But though he found no woman true and good, plenty of other men have lived who could discover women who were virtuous. Witness the women dwelling in Christ's house, nuns. By martyrdom, they prove their constancy, but don't be in a patru, though it be. So you see what's happening. These two gods are talking to each other. Pluto's going to give January his sight back, and Prosperina is going to give the ability to the wife, January's wife, May, to explain what he's now seeing once he sees what's going on. Huh. Don't be a patru to be. He's found no woman who was good. Accept it as it should be understood. In God alone, he meant we may behold the sovereign goodness. God, who sits threefold. Come for the sake of God, who is but one. Why do you make so much of Solomon? What through his life was rich and glorious? What through he made temple, God's his own? What though he made his temple, God's own house? He made one also to false gods, this king. How could he do no more forbidden thing? He was, however, your whitewash, his name, a lecher and an idolater, all the same. Talking about Solomon. The true God, it's kind of irony that these Pluto and Proserpina are talking about God, when in fact they're mythology and they are gods in mythology. This is part of our analysis. The true God in his old age he forsook. God spared him for his father's sake, the book informs us. Or he'd sooner have expired. This rich old Solomon than he desired. The slanders that you publish lie for lie on women are not worth a butterfly. I am a woman, and for a woman's sake must speak or swell and perish of heartbreak. For since he said that our tongues are doomed to rail, I'll answer those who slander us never fail. Good madam, don't be angry any more, said Pluto. I give up. But since I swore to give this man his sight as I have planned, I warn you fairly that my word must stand. I am a king. Lies would discredit me. And I, she said, I am the queen of fairies. I shall provide her an answer never doubted, and now let's have no further words about it. Meanwhile, in the garden with his lovely May, old January was piping like a jay. You are my love, and other I have none. They walked along the pathways one by one, until they came again to the pear tree where Damien was sitting watchfully among the leaves that hung so fresh and green. Alas, May sighed, for love of heaven's queen, I must have some of the small pears that I see, or I shall perish, for so desperately as I can tell you that a woman in my plight may crave fruit, unless her appetite is soothed, she may well die. Alas, the time, had I a servant here, one who could climb. Alas, that I have lost my sight, January cried. Indeed, yes, she replied. But for all of that, although I know that you've got little faith in me, if you would just put your arms around that tree, I could, by setting my foot upon your back, I could climb well enough. My heart's blood should not lack, January said, if it would help you. So down he bent, and she clambered on his back, and up she went. Ladies, who's saying this? The merchant. He's talking to the other pilgrim ladies. I am rude, and I'm an ignorant man. I cannot use fine phrases. Damien pulled up her smock and suddenly pitched in. So the merchant says, ladies, I am a rude and ignorant man. I can't use fine phrases. So he tells the tale as it is. He pulls up her smock and pitched in. And Pluto, when he saw this act of sin, right, adultery, at once he restored to January his sight and made him see as well as ever he might. And when he had regained his sight once more, there never was a man so glad on any score. But with his thoughts fixed always firm and fast upon his wife, up in the tree he cast his opening glance, and where Damien had addressed young May in a manner not to be expressed here, unless I were to speak indecorously. He let out such a yell of agony as does a mother seeing her child die. "Stop! Help, for God's love," January began to cry. "Outrageous woman, what is it? What are you doing?" Promptly she replied, "Sir, what ails you? Be patient and of reasonable mind. I have only helped you see when you were blind. So may my soul be safe. I'm telling no lies. I found out that this is the way to heal your eyes. The sovereign remedy is to make you see was wrestling with a man up in a tree. God knows I did it with the best intent." So she's telling him that this is the way she got him to see. "Wrestle," he answered. "Yes, but in it went." "What's it?" He did it to you. I saw it with my own eyes. May I be hanged if it was otherwise. My medicine is false then. Could you see you never would have been used to such words to me. You have only a glimmer only, but not true sight. I see, he said, as well as I ever I might with both my eyes. And thank God, and God forbid it, but upon my word, it seemed to me that he did it. "You're in a daze, good sir," said May. This is my thanks for helping you see? All I ever tried was to be so kind." "Well, then," January said, "let it all slip from my mind. Come down, my love. If I have spoken amiss, I'm sorry for it, as I hope for bliss. But by my father's soul, I could well see, or so I thought, how Damien was in that tree, lay by you, and your smock lay on your breast." "Well, sir," she answered, "think as you think best. But, sir, a man who wakens out of sleep is hardly able to all to tell whence to keep his mind on things or to see without mistakes. Is hardly able all at once to keep his mind on things or see without mistakes. He has to wait until he truly wakes. So with a man long blinded, it will be he cannot all at once expect to see. When first his sight returns, as he will do when he has his eyes a day or two. Until your vision settles for a while, there's many an object likely to beguile your eyesight. Do take care, for by heaven's king, a man's fancy he perceives a thing that no wise what it seems to be by first view. And he that misconceives, well, misconstrues. And with this she sprang down lightly from the tree. Who now rejoices, if it is not he, stroking her softly, and with many a kiss, back to the palace he leads her home in bliss. And so I end my tale of January, and God bless his holy mother, Mary. Whoa! Epilogue to the Merchant's Tale. God's mercy! From a wife like that, I pray, our host declared. God keep me well away. You see what kind of sleights and subtleties there are in these women? They are busy as bees, fooling us innocent men in age and youth, and in a pinch they'll always wave the truth. On that the Merchant's Tale has set the seal. I have a wife, and there's no blade of steel, although she's poor. She's more faithful and more true, but she's a telltale and a noisy shrew, and has a heap of other faults as well. No matter, these aren't things that it helps to tell. But do you know, this much I can confide, bitter in my remorse at being tied to such a woman. I'd be a fool to try to reckon all her faults. And the reason why? Well, my wife would promptly hear a full report from some among us. Traffic of this sort. Women know how to carry on for fair. Who it would be, I hardly need declare. Besides, to count her vices, every one, exceeds my wit, and so my tale is done. Okay? So there's this epilogue to the Squire's Tale, which we're not going to read. Should X that out. Let's just cross that out. And You've been reading The Merchant's Tale with Jimmy. Wasn't that a good story? I love the way this guy goes in and out of his narration. Isn't it great? What words? What descriptions? This is Chaucer, The Merchant's Tale, the Canterbury Tales. Thank you for spending time with me. That was a long one, but well worth it. I hope you use imagination to picture all this. Any questions, comments, critiques? Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com. Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com. Don't forget, there's other great classical literature on this website. Please join me. Spend as much time as you can learning, because when you read, you learn about how other people lead their lives and how to lead yours. This is an expose, and it got definitely 2 points of view about men and women's relationship, which, by the way, no matter when you're reading this, people haven't changed that much, have they? Have they? I don't know. Jimmy's been married a long time, very successfully, but that's another story. Thank you for visiting with us. Have a great day. Bye.